As the creator and host of the Story of Stuff video and author of the book by the same name, Annie Leonard, like Michael Benelli, is committed to promoting sustainability throughout society. Annie has spent almost 20 years investigating and organizing on behalf of environmental health and social justice issues. In her travels to over 40 countries, visiting hundreds of factories where our stuff is made and the dumps where our stuff is dumped, she has seen at firsthand the horrendous impacts of both over and under consumption around the world. Annie is currently the director of the Story of Stuff project, committed to reclaiming and transforming our industrial and economic systems so that they serve rather than undermine ecological sustainability and social equity. After completing the Story of Stuff, she created the Story of Cap and Trade, about emissions trading, and then in 2010, the Story of Bottled Water and the Story of Cosmetics. She just recently finished the Story of Electronics, which will be out this November. Prior to this, Annie co-founded the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, and more recently, she coordinated the Funders Work Group for Sustainable Production and Consumption, a philanthropic collaborative that addresses the hidden environmental and social impacts of the way we make, use, and throw away the stuff of daily life. Annie has previously held positions with Healthcare Without Harm, Essential Information, and Greenpeace International, and currently serves on the boards of the International Forum for Globalization and Public Citizen. Please welcome Annie Leonard.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to be here. This is my first time at Bioneers by the Bay. I've been a fan of the Marion Institute and Bioneers by the Bay for many years, so it's really a treat to be here in person. So for those of you who've seen the film, The Story of Stuff, or read the book, or who know me, and I'm fortunate to have many friends in the audience today, you know that I'm really into stuff. In fact, some would say I'm a little obsessed with stuff. Every time I look at something, my cell phone, this microphone, this pen, that plastic cup I just took a sip of, its entire life cycle flashes through my mind really fast. It's like this weird neurosis, and I just can't turn it off. So I'll look at my cell phone and I imagine the mines in South Africa and the Congo and the chemical factories in Gujarat and the assembly plants in China and the huge ports and the ships and the dumps in Nigeria or China where it's going to end up. And it's like this weird internal visual neurosis, and that's why I seem a little disoriented sometimes. I'm constantly having to tell my mother, I'm not stoned, I'm stunned. And this is what this is what happens when you spend a decade traveling around the world, visiting the factories where our stuff is made and the dumps where our stuff is dumped. It's what happens when you see firsthand the hidden environmental, health, and social impacts of the way that we make and use and throw away stuff. All those things that our mainstream media and advertising industry tries so hard and so successfully to keep out of view. Now, I have to tell you, it's a fascinating neurosis to have, and if any of you are looking for a neurosis, I really recommend you give this one a try. Start by going to visit your local landfill. I think everyone should have to go visit their local landfill. I think it should be required before you get your first credit card. It's a fascinating way to spend an afternoon. It's fascinating, but sometimes it's a little bit lonely, and people do look at me kind of funny when I stumble through the aisles of a Target store. But one reason I made this Story of Stuff was to be less alone. I wanted more people to join me in thinking about and talking about where all of our stuff comes from and where it goes. I wanted to turn the volume up on the conversation about what's not working with our current systems of production and consumption. Now, some of you might have noticed lately that when we turned up the volume, we got a lot of support. We also got some criticism from some of these Fox News hosts and others. I use the word news loosely there. But you know, it's okay. If you're going to turn the volume up on a conversation, you can't pick which voices partake. And I'd much rather people be fighting about this stuff than ignoring it. I realized in my 20 years of doing this work prior to the story of stuff that one of the obstacles in getting more people to join the conversation was us, the way that we talked about these issues. Environmentalists too often tend to be a whiny and wonky lot. We are hesitant to let go of our charts, and I understand why, because the data is so compelling. I personally love charts, and I actually lie in bed at night and read books like Materials Flow in Industrialized Economies that are full of charts and tables, but I get that not everyone does that. And that leading with charts and leading with data, sometimes it ends up excluding people from joining the conversation. Sometimes the environmental conversation is like a speeding train that is really hard to jump onto if you don't know all the acronyms and jargon. And sometimes we environmentalists are stuck in that myth still that the truth will set us free, and the truth will not set us free, because if it would, we would be free. Because we have the data, we have the evidence, the documentation and scientific analysis about the state of the planet is really solid. What will set us free is organizing, connecting, building community, and getting engaged in our democracy. So that's why I made this Story of Stuff film. I wanted to turn the volume up on the conversation. I wanted to make it accessible without dumbing it down. I wanted more people to get involved in thinking and acting on these issues so that we can actually rewrite the future of stuff. And before we can make change, we have to understand what it is we need to change. So as I see it, there's three main problems with our current systems of production and consumption. There's three main things that we need to change moving forward. And those three things that are not working is that we are trashing the planet, we are trashing each other, and we are not even having fun. Now, that last one is the real kicker, because if it was fun, we might want to have a different conversation. We might want to talk about how to prop up an inherently unsustainable system a little bit longer. Or if it was really fun, if it was like a really good party, we might just say, oh hell, let's just go down in flames because we're having such a good ride. But increasingly, on both ends of the economic spectrum, it's just not working for people. So let's just try something new. Let's look quickly at each one of these. The first is we're trashing the planet. Now there's so much evidence on this part. One of the benefits of the fact of how bad we've trashed the planet is we can increasingly skip this part of the conversation, because it's so clear. There are dead zones in the ocean. The climate is totally out of whack. We are losing species every single day. Across the environmental spectrum, the data is really frightening. I think one of the best overviews of how we're trashing the planet is from the Global Footprint Network. They track overall how many resources humanity uses each year compared to how many resources the planet produces. They say right now that we use 1.5 planets worth of resources each year. And the only way that we can use more than we have is by eating into the stockpiles that nature has accumulated over generation. And that's a real bummer because we're going to need those ecological systems to provide next year's stuff. So when we're not only using up this year's, but eating into the stockpiles, we're undermining the planet's very ability to support life. Fortunately, there are lots and lots of ways that we can change this. Amazing technological innovations. One of the great things about these problems is that they are not intractable. If this was not solvable, it'd be hard to get out of bed in the morning, but so many solutions abound. The second point is that we are trashing each other. We're trashing each other in a couple of ways. One is with toxic chemicals. We now routinely use chemicals that cause cancer, reproductive disorders, neurological problems, birth defects, and a whole range of other problems in our food, our clothing, our furniture, our building materials, our personal care products. It is everywhere, in our electronics. And of course, by using these chemicals in our industrial processes, we're bringing them home into our homes, our schools, our workplaces, into our air and soil and water, and our bodies. These chemicals are now so pervasive that they are showing up in every single body tested on the planet, even newborn babies. Environmental Working Group did a study recently where they looked at the blood, they analyzed the blood and the umbilical cord of brand new babies. So you can't blame it on lifestyle choices. These are brand new babies. And they had an average of over 200 industrial and agricultural chemicals in the umbilical cord of brand new babies. Now, I think, is that not the point at which we draw the line in the sand and say, enough? Enough of bombarding our communities, our planet, our brand new babies with chemicals that are absolutely proven to health problems? When we've reached the point that babies are being born into this world pre-polluted, enough. We're also trashing people on the equity front. While some of us are using way too much stuff, some of us aren't using enough. Half of the world's population is living on less than $2 a day. We recently reached the point for the first time in history where 1 billion people, that's 1 out of 6 people on our planet, is going to bed chronically hungry, is chronically malnourished. Yet here in the United States, we have 5% of the world's population and we use 30% of the world's resources. Our homes, our transportation, our industries, everything is enormously wasteful. We are so stuff-saturated that stuff has become a burden. We used to own our stuff, and increasingly our stuff owns us. You know, we spend our weekends putting it back on shelves, sorting it, seeing if we can get rid of some. It's like a cathartic experience to get a bag of stuff out of your house. You know, how often is it when someone gives you a gift and you look at it and the first thought you have is, where am I going to put this? Right? My house is full, my 2-car garage is full, my mini storage site is full, and we have too much stuff. And this is important to remember, these inequity issues, because often we here in the stuff-saturated part of the world, we often talk about how we need to consume less. We need to reduce consumption. But we need to remember that many, many people out there need to increase consumption. They need to consume more just to meet a basic level of human health and decency. And that means there's extra onus on us, because we need to make room at the table for our global neighbors. We need to use less stuff, we need to use less toxic stuff, and we need to share better. This is really basic principles here. So let's talk for a second about the happiness piece, because that's a little less immediately obvious. How is it that our happiness levels are declining? On a whole variety of studies, our happiness levels are declining when we have more, better, cooler, faster, multitaskable stuff than any previous generation could have even imagined. It's really interesting to look at some of this emerging new data about happiness. It turns out that in spite of the multiple billboards and advertisements we see every day to the contrary, the things which actually provide lasting happiness are not things. It's not an iPad or a new pair of boots or a new car, even if it is a Prius. It turns out that the things that actually provide real lasting happiness are very consistent across age groups, income groups, ethnicities. Once you have your basic needs met, once you have a roof and food and your basic needs met, the things that actually provide happiness are the quality of our social relations, time with friends and family, a sense of meaning beyond oneself, and the act of coming together with others towards shared goals. But the crazy situation we've got ourselves in this country is that we are actually sacrificing and neglecting and undermining all those very things in our quest for ever more stuff. We're working longer hours than any time in recent history. We work longer hours than any other industrialized country except maybe South Korea, depending on which data you look at. We work about 300 hours a year longer than our counterparts in Europe. 43% of people in the United States did not even have a 1-week vacation last year. We spend more time shopping and watching TV than people in any other country, on average now 5 hours a day. We spend 5 hours a day watching TV. We have more stuff, but we have fewer friends. There was recently a study that looked over the last 3 decades how the number of friends that we have has changed. It's gone from an average of 3 very close friends to less than 1. 25% of people in the United States do not have one friend with whom to talk about personal issues with. Can you imagine how lonely that must be to go through life without one friend to talk about these issues in? So the result is we have more stuff, but less friends, and we're less happy. And I have to ask, what is the point of a giant new flat screen TV or a giant, beautiful new Pottery Barn dining room table if we don't have a whole mass of friends to gather around it with? So those are the three big problems that I was thinking about going into making the story of stuff. We're trashing the planet, we're trashing each other, and we're not even having fun. Those three problems and the fact that none of them are intractable, that solutions abound for all of them, that we absolutely can figure out how to make stuff, use stuff, and throw away stuff without trashing the planet, without trashing each other, and with far less stress and more fun. Now, the response to the story of stuff amazed me. I had no idea that this film would resonate so widely. When I made the film, I said that success would be 50,000 people watching this film. That was my goal. To my total amazement, we got that in the first day. We've now had over 12 million views. Google Analytics says in 223 countries and territories around the world. It's been translated into dozens of languages. We get emails every day from Nigeria and Bhutan and Pakistan and South Africa and all over the world. We're making new films. We made The Story of Bottled Water, which is a look at manufactured demand, how companies get us to spend enormous amounts of money for something you can get basically free from your kitchen tap. We made The Story of Cosmetics, which looks at the prevalence of toxic chemicals in everyday products. And coming out November 9th is The Story of Electronics, which is a look at planned obsolescence, why these things are loaded with toxic chemicals and break. The only consumer product with a shorter lifespan than a cell phone these days is an ice cream cone. So if you're not yet, please sign up on our webpage or our Facebook group, and we'll let you know when we make new films. And we could not get these films out without all of you. People are constantly calling me up saying, how'd you get 12 million views? I said, because we've got a lot of friends. So I really want to thank all of you who forwarded that link, that URL to your friends and your families and coworkers. And please stay tuned for the additional films, and please help us do that, because we simply could never, ever have done this without all of you. So thank you for being part of the Story of Stuff community. Thank you for sharing the film. Thank you for being part of this conversation. We've succeeded in turning the volume up on the conversation, so the next task before us now is to turn the volume up on the action. We have to turn the volume way up. Now, there's a part of doing this that worries me, and there's a part of doing this that overcomes that worry. So first, let me share with you the worry part. On the worry side, I'm worried that we are forgetting how to make change in this country. I see this when I travel around the country and I show the Story of Stuff film. And for those of you who've seen it, you know that it lays out a pretty broad, pretty systemic critique. There's a lot of problems that I run through in that 20 minutes. I cannot tell you how often I show that film and someone raises their hand and says so earnestly, what can I buy differently to solve this problem? Or people raise their hand and say, what can I do? And I like to see where people are thinking, so I say, well, what can you think of doing? And I get this laundry list of, I can ride my bike, I can recycle, I can stop buying bottled water, I can carry my own bag to the store, I can buy PVC-free, I can buy recycled, I can buy fair trade, I can buy organic. It goes on and on and on, but they almost all start with I. And I've realized that the bulk of the responses, almost all of them that people are coming up with as I travel the country, these are ideas to respond as individuals and usually from our consumer self, not collectively as citizens. We've been lulled by these lists of 10 simple things you can do to save the planet, shopping your way to a better planet. I recently saw a book that said, How to Save the World Without Leaving Your Desk. And I thought, well, the first thing you should do is leave your desk. So I've come to realize that we all have two different parts of ourselves. We have a consumer part and a citizen part. And that consumer part is validated and spoken to and nurtured from day one. And anyone who has a child knows it is from day one we begin to be related to as consumers. So much that often you'll notice in the media the word consumer and human being are used interchangeably. It is the primary way that we engage with others in the world is as consumers. So we hang out in this consumer part of ourselves, which is overdeveloped. And at the same time, our citizen part has atrophied. And that's a really, really big deal because we're faced with some huge problems right now. Growing social inequity, rising unemployment, literally changing the entire climate of the planet. Like, these are really huge environmental and social issues. We are not going to be able to shop our way out of this. But we are stuck. Thank you. we're stuck in this consumer part, and I understand why, because we're familiar with that. We know how to do it, and it's reassuring to stick in a place where we're familiar. We can often misrepresent that or misunderstand that taste of familiarity that we get for some kind of reassurance and positivity, but it's just the familiarity that we recognize. It's not that it's actually efficient. But any one of us could get online right now, find any product in the world, and get it delivered to your door in 48 hours. We know how to do that. So it's attractive to stay there. What we need to do is step out of that consumer self and step back into our citizen self. Because it's by being citizens, working collectively, working together, that we can really build the power to shift the path that our country is on. Now, I'm not saying that when we shop, we shouldn't shop responsibly. Of course we should. Of course, when we shop, we should buy the least toxic, least exploitative product available. There's a lot of value in doing that, but that's not going to be enough. At best, it doesn't work. It's not enough. The sum of all of those actions, if all of us started doing all those little things, it's not commensurate with the scale of the problems. And it simply doesn't work. I am a living example that it simply does not work to try to change the planet and protect our families by an individual lifestyle level. On toxic chemicals I'm thinking of, I am super vigilant and uptight about toxic chemicals. I am so uptight about toxic chemicals that I would not wish my level of uptightness on any of you. I screen everything coming into my house. There is no PVC, no BPA, no BFRs. There are no Teflon frying pans. There's no Scotchgard waterproofing. There's no PVC shower curtains. I buy organic food. I even buy used furniture so that it off-gassed in someone else's house. Like, I am way uptight. And I had my body burden tested last year. That's where they draw blood and analyze what toxics are in my body. And even with that level of vigilance, my body is loaded with toxic chemicals. My body is carrying hundreds of toxic chemicals, just like all of your bodies. I have toxic chemicals in my body that were banned when I was a toddler. I have toxic chemicals in my body that I never knowingly ingested or applied onto my skin. I have toxic chemicals in my body that I never gave permission to Monsanto or Dow or any of those other companies to put in my body, yet they're in my body even with that level of uptightness. There is simply no way that we can protect ourselves and our families and solve these problems by making better choices at the grocery store. In fact, I'd like to suggest that the best thing you can do at the grocery store is turn to the person next to you and introduce yourselves and ask them what's on their mind and what would they like to change, and invite them over for dinner and figure out where are the commonalities so that we can work together to make this a better country. At worst, those individual lifestyle changes are not just not going to work, but they actually distract us from the real solution. And this is something that we all need to be aware of. Because while those individual lifestyle choices are very important, of course we should buy organic, of course we should carry our own bag, of course, they don't fall in the category of making change. They fall in the category of like flossing your teeth and washing your hands after you use the toilet. They're like basic adult household responsibility and functioning. And the problem comes when we equate them with making political change, and so we tick it off and say, oh, civic duty done, I recycled. So for example, I just made this film about the story of cosmetics. And it was really tricky talking about this because we want to encourage people to make better choices. And if you haven't done it, I recommend you all Google Skin Deep and look at this fabulous online database that has tens of thousands of personal care products and lists what toxic chemicals are in them and which ones are safer. Of course, you should look at Skin Deep and buy the least toxic product available. But our job as activists and as social change leaders is that when we tell people about Skin Deep, to make sure that that's not the last thing that they do, but that that's the first thing. That they don't use the fact that they now know how to navigate the toxics in the cosmetics aisle to placate them, but that they are outraged that there are toxics in the cosmetics aisle, and that they join the Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families Coalition to reform chemical policy law to get all the toxics out of there in the first place. Otherwise, if we do not make sure that that individual consumer action leads to greater change, we will be forever swimming upstream against the current, which is exhausting, and there's no way that we're going to convince everyone to do it. What we really need to do is change the current. So even those who are not paying the slightest bit of attention still get the environmentally correct option, because that's the only option available. So I'm looking forward to the day that I show the Story of Stuff film, and instead of people raising their hand and saying, what can I buy differently, I want them to raise their hand and say, what meaningful collective action can we take to solve this problem at its root? And you know what will be great about that? Do you remember what I said about the true causes of happiness, the real sources of happiness? Joining together with others towards shared goals, having a sense of purpose. Becoming an activist, becoming a civic leader, engaging in democracy provides all those things that provide real happiness. Joining organizations, causes, activism actually makes us happier. So not only will we save the planet, not only will we transform the economy and combat inequity, but we'll also be much happier. So it's not about come over here and join us environmentalists and we'll all wear sandals and eat cardboard-tasting veggie burgers and scorn people who forget their bags and become huge nags. It's about come over here and we will rebuild the power to get this country on track and have way more fun in the process. So that forgetting how to make change is the one thing that's got me worried, but overall I am enormously full of hope. And the main reason I'm enormously full of hope is that there are so many of us who care, that we are not alone. I used to feel a little marginalized because of how obsessed I was with this, and anytime I would leave my hometown of Berkeley, I would feel like, oh my God, I'm the only one who cares. But I found out that is so not true. There are millions and millions and millions of us out there who care. In a way, I feel like the Story of Stuff film took the temperature of the public. We have been bombarded with literally millions of emails from people all over the world, fourth graders to economics professors, all different ages, all different ethnicities, just people everywhere saying, yes, I knew that, I just didn't know how to say it. Or I got one that was so funny that said, I never thought about this, I wouldn't have even watched your movie if I knew what it was about, but it changed my life. How can I help? We have been flooded with these positive emails saying, thank you for turning the volume up in this conversation. How can I help? So I started thinking, maybe there are a lot more of us. And I started looking at some of the data online. This is some really recent polling. 70% of Americans, Gallup poll says, are sympathetic to environmental issues. 74% of us are concerned about toxic chemicals in consumer products and think we need stronger regulations. 85% of people in this country think that corporations have too much power in the political process. If you're interested in that, stay tuned, because our next film after the Story of Electronics is about the story of Citizens United, about the Supreme Court case that gives corporations unlimited freedom of speech. So those are really, really high numbers. We should not feel alone and marginalized. We've got, by different estimates, 3/4 of the people out there are sympathetic to the environment. It seems funny anyway to be sympathetic to that which sustains life, but whatever. At least they're on board. Those are really high numbers. Those are high enough to make change. Those are higher numbers of support than the abolitionists had fighting slavery. Those are higher numbers of support than the civil rights activists had. Those are higher numbers of support than women had in trying to get the vote. Yet we often get hung up on that small percentage that is not with us and say, how can we convince that small percentage, the unreachables, I call them? Forget them. We have got enough people to make some serious change. Imagine if those fighting slavery had gone slave owner by slave owner and saying, excuse me, let me tell you why you really shouldn't have slaves. It's like, forget it. We got enough people to change the rules, outlaw slavery, outlaw toxic chemicals. We got to change the rules of the game here. Often people ask me what the best place to get involved in, and one of the great things about having such an all-pervasive problem is that there are so many ways to get involved. There are so many entry points. You don't even have to do something boring. So think about what turns you on, because it's going to be a long haul. We've got decades of work ahead to build a new economy that respects the planet and people. It's going to be a long haul, and it's going to be a lot easier and a lot more fun if you love what you're doing. Now, for me, it's garbage. I get that it might not be for all of you, although I just give it a chance before you write it off. It might be sustainable food systems, it might be public transportation, it might be healthcare reform, tax reform, green jobs, ending the war, building a new economy. You know, there's so many ways to get involved. In a sense, it doesn't even matter what you do, just dive on in. We need to start exercising that citizen muscle. We learn to win by winning. We learn to make change by making change. So just start somewhere and encourage your coworkers, your neighbors, your family to join you. We have so many solutions on the technical front to our materials problems. It's another way that I keep my hope alive, besides meeting groups like you, is by really looking at what some of these industries are coming up with on the technical solutions. There are so many technical solutions. It's absolutely possible to make stuff with less waste and less toxic, with zero waste and zero toxics, with green chemistry, with biomimicry, with zero waste. You guys in Massachusetts have the Toxics Use Reduction Act and the Toxics Use Reduction Institute. Check it out at TURI, ToxicUseReductionInstitute.org. This is a world-famous place that has worked with Massachusetts industries and has cut toxic chemical use and hazardous waste production in half in Massachusetts in a decade. I mean, that is so cool. Other states and other countries haven't even started this. There is so much potential to make things better. Knowing how to make stuff better is not the obstacle. Creating the political will, inspiring our leaders in government and business to get on this new plan, that's the obstacle. We have the know-how, we have the technology, solutions abound. What we're missing is a strong, broad, loud movement calling for a new path, calling for enough of this old economy, the economy of yesterday, and investing our time and energy and resources and attention into building a new, sustainable, and just path ahead. And the good thing about that is that we will not only have this luscious, beautiful planet to enjoy for generations to come, we will not only have an engaged democracy that is then ready to take on the next challenge, but we will also have way more fun in the process. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you.